I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and this is the Retro Hung Adventures. And once again, we're looking at some Super Nintendo pickups that I found that I honestly couldn't believe. I found games that I didn't already have in my library, especially ones that were under $20. In fact, none of these was over $10. This was one of the $9.99 ones, which I guess technically is more than 10 once you figure in sales tax. But regardless, this one is called Toddlers. And if it seems to you like it's a Lemmings clone, it's even described as a Lemmings clone when you look it up online. So, very clearly, Sega knew what they were doing here. They saw a game, they decided to clone the game and release their own version of it. I don't know if that was super successful for them, but it did come out on Commodore Amiga first, so maybe there wasn't a version of Lemmings on Amiga at the time, though I find that hard to believe. It also came out on MS-DOS and then finally Super Nintendo in 1993. So we move on from that to WWF Royal Rumble. This was a strange pickup for me in that I already had the instruction manual, but not the game. I suppose now that I have both the game and the manual, I need to find the box, right? So that's the way these things tend to work. And I'll have another example of that in just a minute. But I think most of you will be familiar with the WWF games on Super Nintendo. Don't need to go too in depth into them. But if you're not a watcher of professional wrestling, then names like the narcissist Lex Luger and Randy Macho Man Savage may not be so familiar to you. Then again, you may know Macho Man from the "Want a little excitement? Snap into a Slim Jim" commercials. Or you may know him as Spider-Man's opponent Bonesaw from the Spider-Man movie. Or you may know his voiceover work from Space Ghost Coast to Coast. There are actually quite a few ways you could know Macho Man Randy Savage. So he kind of transcended professional wrestling into just being generally part of the pop culture landscape. And God bless, still miss him to this day. He was truly a legend inside and outside of the squared circle. Famously a little overprotective of his later to be ex-wife Miss Elizabeth, but I I don't want to dwell too much on personal misdeeds of that kind. I've I've got no firsthand knowledge of anything he did or didn't do, but reportedly he just didn't like seeing her around other men when he wasn't there. And guys, just don't be like that, and girls don't be like that, and people in relationships just don't be like that. Just trust your partner. If you don't trust your partner, what are you in a relationship for? I'm sorry, I'm just babbling at this point. So let's move on. Test another game. Here we have NBA Jam. This one I actually have the box and the instruction manual and the insert tray for. The only thing I was missing was the game. And I think I overlooked this one for the longest time because I had NBA Jam on Sega Genesis and I actually prefer to play it with a Genesis controller, so it never really occurred to me to complete this game before now. But I saw it for $10, and that price was the right price for me because it actually charts a little higher than that on eBay and in some other places. So I just took the advantage to take it when it was available at a price I was willing to pay. And you kind of have to do that these days with the fact that everybody thinks every old video game they have is suddenly worth a gold mine and can be graded on WADA and they can get tens of thousands of dollars for it. Newsflash, your copy of NBA Jam, even if it's sealed in the box and graded by WADA, is not going to be worth millions of dollars because there are a lot of copies of NBA Jam out there. And that's a problem with some of these games that get graded and rated. They're not taking into account the millions of copies of these games that were sold. Like Super Mario 64 is not worth multiple millions of dollars. I could have bought 10 sealed boxed copies of that from a Toys R Us liquidation sale if I had really wanted to, and I could have kept them sealed in the box all of this time. I could not have sold 10 of them in that condition for millions of dollars each. That's just not real. I'm sorry, I'm ranting. Anyway, that has been exposed by people like Pat the NES Punk and Carl Jobst and RTG85. They've done a bunch of good videos about the WADA heritage auctions, retro gaming, retro grading scandals of people buying the games and then rating the games and then selling the games they rated, which is clearly a conflict of interest. Not to imagine that they've also done shill bidding. Can't prove that, don't know that firsthand, but allegedly they bid on their own games to drive up the price, which is not only unethical, it's blatantly illegal. So just don't trust $1 million prices for retro video games, even if they're sealed. They're out of proportion to reality. This is Zool, which is a game that I believe I also have on Sega Genesis and Atari Jaguar, of all things. Zool seemed to get around quite a bit, but it's a pretty typical platformer. Got a very bright, candy-coated, candy-colored look, but I don't think it's anything too special to write home about. It's just a run-of-the-mill platforming game. Now, infamously, the Zuul intellectual property was briefly in the hands of the people that made Ninja Bread Man, and that was supposed to be a Zool game, but then they lost the license or didn't do anything with it in time, one or the other, and so they just reskinned it as Ninja Bread Man and made a terrible game. Data Designs Inc., the home of multiple times reskin games that are all basically the same crap. But the original Zool, you can't really say that about. It's at least a standalone, interesting platformer, even if a rather generic platformer. Like I said, it's nothing to write home about, but it's certainly not the worst thing. In fact, I would say it's probably more playable than a game like Bubsy, and I don't even hate Bubsy nearly as much as most people seem to on the internet. It's, I wouldn't say the first Bubsy game is a great game, but it's not a huge steaming pile. Bubsy 3D, maybe. Not so much the first Bubsy, it's just kind of clunky. Here's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I didn't expect to be like a Castlevania game. I don't know that I expected it to be like the movie or even the original book from way back in the day. What I definitely wasn't expecting was a side-scrolling adventure with a really weak character who just gets pounded on by people in a tavern and their guard dogs. Like, he's got a little dagger or a short sword, and he can attack with it. He can do a slash, or he can duck and do a slash, but basically he's getting his ass handed to him by everybody in sight. And they constantly respawn too, which isn't untypical of games like this, but at the same time, when you're so weak and you have so few hit points, getting attacked over and over again by multiple respawning enemies is extremely annoying. Let's move on to Jim Power. And this one has also had a resurgence as an intellectual property of late. They've licensed out new versions of it through Pico Interactive to multiple different consoles and platforms that never had a Jim Power game before. So there is some life in this old franchise, but I don't know if this is the best example of it. I do like the graphical effect, the foreground and the background scrolling in opposite directions to give you that 3D effect, but you die in one hit, and these enemies are moving so fast you barely have time to attack them. I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong here. I feel like I'm barely even given time to get used to the movement of my character, my Jim Power protagonist, and then he's getting wailed on. And with a superhero name like Jim Power, you would expect him to be powerful instead of so weak. But I will come back to this one later on. I just felt I needed to get through this stack of 7 games, test them all, dump them all, have them on my SD card so I can pop them into a computer or an analog Super NT, or even DSD to SNES, just pop the card in the top and run them from that. So it's nice to make backups when I pick up new games. That's my usual MO now. If I pick up something, I'll immediately dump it, and then I can play it more after I'm done testing. Though the one that I probably won't be doing that with is Goal. I picked up Goal because it was super cheap. It was like $2.99 or $3.99. Perhaps I should have been suspicious of that price because I ended up having to clean it 5 times. I shit you not. I got out the Q-tips, I got out the rubbing alcohol. I kept cleaning this until the point I thought my fingers were going to bleed, at which point I had no desire to play it once I actually got it working. I was like, screw this crap. I'm dumping it. I'm testing the dump. I'm making sure that the ROM I dumped works, and then I am done with this. So, no love for soccer, or as the Europeans call it, football. Not today anyway. Not after I have to spend that much time cleaning one cartridge. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been the Retro Hunting Adventures with some new Super Nintendo games that I just picked up. And as always, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Whatever you do, comments on the video, all of the above, it helps the channel grow. I appreciate your support. And I'll be back with something other than Super Nintendo games next week. I promise you that. I know it's overdue because I've been on a Super Nintendo kick lately, but I promise you I've got other stuff in the works really soon. Bye for now.